Today we're at the NCSU Arboretum and we're going to take a look at quite a different group of plants than we've ever explored in our previous trips here. Most gardeners in North Carolina deal with shade in their landscape. It may be artificial from overhead structures, or it may be under shade trees in the yard. A lot of people feel that this is kind of a hostile environment, that you can't grow many plants, but indeed there are thousands of things that will grow quite well in the shade, and we're going to take a look at a few of interesting ones in this category. To start with, we're here in a section of the lath house at the Arboretum, and we have approximately 1,500 different kinds of plants in this house on display. And coming down to a group that people perhaps might overlook, although when they hear the word they automatically think, yes, shade, and that is the group of plants known collectively as ferns. Now, there are all kinds of ferns all over the world, literally hundreds and hundreds of species, ranging anywhere in height from 2 or 3 inches, tiny little plants, to things that may reach 4 or 5 feet in height, even in our climate here. They can be evergreen and stay year-round for interest, or some of them will die back to the ground in the winter as well. As you would see looking through the bed here as we walk along, there is every kind of texture in the world, from very delicate cut leaf sorts of plants that are almost thread-like, very broad foliage leaves, and some that do have color as well. We tend to think of ferns as not having much color, but this particular one here is one called the Japanese painted fern, and in the spring it has brilliant patterns of purples, different shades of greens, colors, and so forth. There are actually some golden ones and variegated ones as well. As a group, it's one that you typically don't see that often in the retail garden centers of the state, but there are many mail-order specialists that carry a wide variety of these, so they are available if gardeners would like to use them. From here, I'd like to go on over and look at a different group of plants that's more familiar, perhaps, and that's some of the different kinds of azaleas that one can grow. At first look, these might appear to be ordinary azaleas that everybody's familiar with all over North Carolina as one of the most popular landscape plants that we have. In reality, these are quite different and a new group of plants that's becoming an exciting new addition to the landscape. These tend to grow low and flat. They can get up to 5 to 6 feet wide, a foot in height usually at a maximum, and have all the normal color range: white, pink, red, purple flowers. Many different varieties. Some that we have here are things like Pink Cascade, Pink Pancake, Alexandra, Joseph Hill, many others. They're not as easy to find at every garden center, but they are in the trade. They are commercially available and well worth looking for. So you can landscape where you have the ground cover effect and still get that bright array of flowers in the spring. Now, at this time of year in the summer, it's kind of quiet here in terms of color. Let's take a look at another group of plants that are excellent in the shade that give you fabulous color in the summertime, the hostas. We tend to think of shade as an area of all green and not a lot of color in the garden, but certainly hostas give us a chance to disprove that theory. Hostas have been a familiar plant with gardeners for well over 100 years, but there's an entirely new race of these coming in today through the hybridizers that expand the vision that we've had of them in the past. In fact, it's almost getting overwhelming how many new varieties there are. I recently heard of a garden where a hobbyist now has over 1,400 different varieties. As you can see just from this small group here in our Arboretum trials, they do have a lot to offer in terms of foliage, color, and texture. You can select plants that have dark green foliage, a sort of a pale chartreuse green, into the bright yellows, the ice blues, variegations of various kinds. The foliage types are almost endless. And then, of course, the extra special bonus on top of that are the flowers. And not a lot of plants that grow in shady areas flower that profusely or that well. And certainly with the hostas you do get that. They range from whites in through the various purples, and there are even intensely fragrant types that make a nice addition into the garden. Another thing that I think is nice about them for the landscape use is the fact that they are so variable in price. They are within the range of everybody. You can buy hostas for $1, or if you get into the rare collector brand new variety types, you might pay up as much as $200 a plant. But those are, again, for collectors only. I think we could take a look in here and just at one plant to give you a little bit of this idea of the diversity. This little plant, Hosta lanceolata, is a dwarf plant from Japan, one of the wild species. And there are types that are even smaller than this. The foliage is not over 1.5 inches in length. Compare that to the one behind it with this large foliage that's some 3 feet in diameter with tall flower spikes. This gives you an idea of just the kind of diversity that you can work with. So the plants we've seen today, the ferns, the hostas, and the azaleas, give you a little bit of an idea of some of the plants that you can use in shade, but there are hundreds of others as well. So seek out your markets, experiment a little bit, and you can find that the shady areas of your garden can be, in many cases, the most interesting areas you work with.